Welcome to the newest episode of Beatin' and Bangin'. I'm your host, Kyle Dalton. In today's episode, we're going to recap the race weekend from the heartland of America in Kansas, including a follow-up to last week's big story from New Hampshire and the conflict between Joe Gibbs Racing teammates Denny Hamlin and Ty Gibbs. As you might expect, the media wanted to talk to both drivers this weekend about what happened last weekend, and the pair took two very different approaches in how they responded. Plus, following the unexpected news on Friday and the departure of race director Denny Hamlin, I saw something on Friday night that I thought NASCAR might consider adopting in the future that I think would go a long way toward building some much-needed trust with the fans. We'll also talk about a hilarious prank pulled off by a driver this weekend on his teammate. And of course, we'll talk about that race, which was 400 miles of action-packed racing that concluded with an absolutely thrilling finish and Chase Elliott pulling off the win and joining his buddy Ryan Blaney in the round of 8. However, before we talk about that race, the first thing I wanted to discuss is something that I saw on Friday night, and it was the football game between Virginia and Florida State. I don't know if you watched it, but there were a couple of calls that were reviewed by the ACC Game Operations Center. Watch this.
Hey, Dave, we're looking at the back piece.
Got it. I'm at the back piece.
Left foot.
Bravo and try your best ones.
So what you saw right there was the behind-the-scenes conversation between the replay officials and all the parties involved that make the final decision on the call. Listening and watching that take place, I thought of a couple of things. One, the Southeastern Conference definitely needs to adopt this policy. In fact, I think all conferences should. This kind of transparency is absolutely what fans want and deserve. They want to know what's happening. Why was a specific decision made? Give them a reason to trust and understand the reasoning behind the decision. So the SEC should do it, but I also think NASCAR should do it as well. And I think it's even more important now on the heels of the news late last week that race director Denny Hamlin had parted ways with the sanctioning body. While Bob Pockrass reported that the departure wasn't performance-related, you can't help but wonder. Remember, Hamilton was in race control during the dual qualifiers at Daytona earlier this year and called a caution a few hundred feet from the finish line, which awarded the win to Austin Cindric instead of Eric Jones, who crossed the finish line first. In the Daytona 500 a few days later, Hamilton didn't call a caution on the final lap for a crash involving race leader Denny Hamlin. After Daytona, Hamilton admitted fault in the duel and that NASCAR would try to race back to the finish line on the final lap when possible. A week later at Atlanta, a caution would be thrown for a crash on the final lap, which awarded the win to Christopher Bell while he was in a 3-wide battle for the win with Kyle Larson and Carson Hocevar. And that was just the first few races of the season. There have been other questionable calls as well, like Chicago and that violent Cody Ware crash into the tires and that very delayed caution. So Hamilton leaves late last week, and then I see that game on Friday night, and it just makes sense to me that NASCAR would be more transparent and adopt a similar policy. Let us understand why a decision is made, why a caution is thrown when it's thrown, and let us hear from the booth up in the tower, as they call it, what they're talking about. What are they deliberating about? And let the fans know why they made that decision. Do I think that will happen? No. Do I wish it would happen? Absolutely. I think it would be so good for the sport, and not just for the fans, but for the sanctioning body as well, because it would create some much needed goodwill. All right, now let's move on to Saturday and driver media availabilities. As you might expect, Denny Hamlin met with reporters, and the first question he was asked was about the incident and what happened last week at New Hampshire with his teammate, Ty Gibbs.
Where do things stand with Ty right now, and what are the expectations for the next 6 races?
I think they're in a good place. We had some meetings this week. I thought they were all productive meetings, but obviously the guts of that, obviously going to need to be confidential.
If you want to talk about what was said, can you say, did all the drivers get to speak, and did you had asked for leadership to kind of step in? Do you feel like they did that?
Yeah, all the drivers had an opportunity to speak and try to come up with a plan, and I think we did our best to come up with one. That's it. That's all I have. Sorry.
So Denny wouldn't go into details about what was discussed besides the drivers all talked about it. But then I thought his response was really interesting to a question posed by Fox's Bob Pockrass. Take a listen.
Is there anything after 5 or 6 days that you feel like you should have done differently at New Hampshire?
Yeah. Well, certainly. Absolutely. I think that, I definitely got hotter under the collar. It went too far on my end, and certainly there was things that I wish I could have done a little differently.
So Denny did take responsibility and admitted that he got hot under the collar last week at New Hampshire and should have done things differently. That was Hamlin's perspective. So what did Ty Gibbs have to say about all of it? Nothing. That's because the 22-year-old deliberately avoided reporters, according to The Athletic's Jeff Gluck, who wrote, quote, Ty Gibbs saw several reporters waiting for him after qualifying. He quickly walked to the other end of pit road and hopped on a golf cart and drove away as Bob Pockris, who speed walked faster than the rest of us, tried asking a question. Guess that's a no comment. He could have just said that instead of making us chase him, but okay, end quote. So I really don't care how you look at it, or I don't care what side you're on, Hamlin or Gibbs. But there's no denying that's a bad look for Ty Gibbs. He could have just said no comment. Or did what he did last week when he was interviewed by Kim Kuhn after the incident and just say, we discussed it and I'm focused forward on next week. But avoiding the media is never the right answer. It's never going to look good, and quite frankly, it just shows his immaturity. Now let's move on to practice and qualifying. And a week after Ryan Blaney won the race and advanced to the round of 8, his weekend at Kansas got off to a terrible start when he crashed early on in practice and didn't get to run a qualifying lap. But that wasn't the only bad Penske news. Joey Logano was the 35th fastest car during practice and was a half second off the top car. Austin Cindric wasn't much better, running 20th. At the end of practice, things got even worse for the number 22 as his right rear went down with 5 minutes remaining and he had to get an assist back to pit lane. The only note that I have from qualifying comes from a conversation between Chase Elliott and his crew chief, Alan Gustafson. Before sharing that story, I'll give you guys a little behind-the-scenes look of my weekend work. During each qualifying session, I record the radio for every single driver when they run their lap, just in case they say something of interest. So I was doing that on Saturday when Chase Elliott made his lap, and I caught this after it was over.
P4 there. Good job.
Good job. Way better than that. 28.
Great job, bud. Spectacular. I'll buy you dinner tonight.
Now we're talking.
Clearly, Elliott was in high spirits after his 4th place qualifying run. And I thought it was a nice exchange between the crew chief and the driver, and it showed that they were really feeling good about their car and their chances, which translated into what we witnessed yesterday. Oh yeah, and it sounded like Elliott got a free dinner out of the deal. And one final thing before we get to the race, and it comes from the boys at RFK Racing. Now, apparently I missed the early part of this conversation, but whatever it was, Chris Buescher felt it warranted a response. Take a look at what he did.
Next time he's going to give me some minute rice. All right. Someone tell Ryan he forgot to lock his doors.
Yeah, I was blown away watching this and thinking to myself, never in a million years would I think to do this. But I'm proud of my fellow Texan for his ingenuity. Now take a look at what happened when Priest discovered his missing door.
I'm driving to the airport with one door. I'm going to get him back.
That's gotta be one of the craziest pranks I've ever seen pulled off, especially in the middle of a racetrack. And that is definitely the content that I'm here for. All right, now let's move on to yesterday's race. Chase Briscoe set on the pole for an impressive 7th time this season and jumped out to the early lead and led for those first 19 laps before Denny Hamlin made a pass for the lead. In those first 20 laps, I noted that there were 2 big movers, and they were both from 23XI Racing and going in opposite directions. Tyler Reddick had gained 7 spots in those first 20 laps, while his teammate Bubba Wallace had dropped 9. On lap 30, we had our first round of pit stops, with the number 23 car being one of the first heading down pit road, trying to address his issue. When that pit cycle was complete, Kyle Larson jumped ahead of Hamlin. But Hamlin, who would prove to have one of the fastest cars all day, passed Larson a couple laps into the run and Larson responded over his team radio with 2 words saying, "He's fast." On lap 55, we had our first caution for the day when Cody Ware got into the wall. During that stop, we learned what would become a common pit strategy for the day when Hamlin took 2 tires. In the final 18 laps of the stage, Hamlin held off charges by both Chase Elliott and Kyle Larson to win the stage. Following Hamlin was Larson, Elliott, Bell, and Chastain. While 2 of the HMS playoff cars were running well, William Byron, who had started 11th, finished 14th and wasn't happy about his car.
We're so fucking bad. We're so fucking bad.
In stage 2, Christopher Bell jumped out in front before we had our second caution of the day when Ryan Preece and John Hunter Nemechek got together. During that caution, Hamlin started reporting that he was having troubles with his throttle sticking. After the race resumed in around lap 100, the top 4 were Bell, Larson, Elliott, and Hamlin. It was around this same time that the broadcast mentioned how evenly this season has gone between those 2 organizations, with each one of them winning 12 races. Meanwhile, William Byron's frustrations continued as he was struggling back in the field in 21st position. Also of note during that second stage, the number 23 car, which had qualified 7th but had dropped back to 19th in the first stage, woke up after some adjustments and had moved inside the top 5. When that second stage came to an end, it was Hamlin sweeping the stages. He was followed by Christopher Bell, Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, and Chase Briscoe. In that third and final stage, and with just under 60 laps remaining, J.J. Yaley went for a spin and brought out a yellow. During that caution, Denny Hamlin told his team that he was starting to have power steering issues. The following restart proved problematic for Team Penske because both Joey Logano and Austin Cindric were involved in an 11-car incident that began when the cars at the front didn't get a good start, and the effects dominoed back into the pack. After the next start and 30 laps into that next run, it was hard to imagine someone other than a Toyota winning the race, with Hamlin leading and 4 other Toyotas inside the top 7, with Elliott and Larson being the only non-Toyotas. But then with 13 laps to go, Kyle Busch lost the tire carcass and brought out a caution. Unfortunately for the number 11, his hopes of a win took a major hit on that stop when his pit crew had trouble with the jack and he had a 9-second 2-tire stop. Ryan Blaney, who had impressively moved his way up into the top 5, saw his hopes of victory vanish when he got a speeding penalty. And as we talk about every week, cautions breed cautions. We had our next one just 3 laps later when Carson Hocevar went for a spin. But take a look at the accident and then what happened and what was said on the broadcast.
And a caution's out.
Caution.
Carson Hocevar around.
Now, who is the leader here?
Oh, no caution.
No caution.
Pardon me. Now it flies.
You hear Lee Diffie saying there's a caution. He said that when he saw Hocevar spinning, naturally assuming NASCAR would put it out. Officials did put out the yellow more than 11 seconds later. All I could think was they can't put this one on Jasson and Hamilton. So what was the reason for the delay? Why did it take them almost 12 seconds to put out a caution? Again, this is what I mentioned at the very beginning of the episode. If NASCAR had the same transparency as the ACC officials, we would have known why there was a delay, and we would have known what happened behind the scenes. This incident is just another reason for fans to question the sanctioning body officials. But they could turn this type of thing into a positive if fans were clued in on what happened and why it happened. On the green-white checkered restart, we had a scary crash with Zane Smith literally riding on the wall and then getting upside down. So naturally, when a wreck like this happens, I like to go back and watch the in-car cameras of the drivers who were behind it so you can get a different perspective of what happened. Kyle Busch was behind Smith when it happened, so I went to watch the number 8 in-car camera, and he said something interesting. Take a listen.
All right, they're going to stop us on the backstretch here with the 38 flipping. Another one bites the dust.
After the red flag delay that lasted for more than 8 minutes, we had an overtime restart, and it was anyone's guess on who might win. But there was a good chance it was going to be a Toyota, with Bubba Wallace lining up on the inside of the front row and his 2311 Racing teammate, Tyler Reddick, right behind him, and Christopher Bell lining up on the outside of the number 23 with his JGR teammate Chase Briscoe right behind him. Denny Hamlin lined up behind Briscoe in row 3 with Kyle Larson to his inside. Chase Elliott started on the outside of row 5. Coming to the white after one trip around the 1.5-mile track, Wallace held the lead on the low line with Denny Hamlin right behind him, while Chase Briscoe, Christopher Bell, and Chase Elliott all fanned out for a wide. On the backstretch of the final trip around the track, Hamlin dove to the inside of Wallace and going into turn 3, drifted up the track into the side of the number 23 car, which then slid up and grazed the outside wall. Hamlin appeared to be in line for the win until Chase Elliott dove hard to the inside coming out of turn 4 and got into the door of the number 11 car before surging out in front and incredibly taking the checkered flag first. Hamlin finished second, and he was followed by Bell, Briscoe, and Wallace. Unsurprisingly, Wallace wasn't happy with his team co-owner when it happened or on the cool-down lap.
Keep coming top hard, got the bottom covered here. Keep coming top hard, the bottom, all the way down, all the way down. All the way through the line. Hold your line, check the flag. Not much you can do about that. He's a fucking deuce.
After the race, Wallace could be seen coming up and shaking Denny Hamlin's hand and telling him, "Good job." Here's what he had to say about that last lap move to SiriusXM NASCAR Radio.
They knew you were here.
Yeah, for sure. The effort that went in, it was a full race for us. Figuring out what we needed to start. We dropped like a rock, and man, it was frustrating, but we all kept our heads in it and fought hard and put ourselves in contention, and it is what it is. So hate that we came on with top 5. I've actually been looking at the top 5 stats, and they've been lack. So we got one more today.
Take me through that final restart.
Yeah, just hard racing, and boundaries got crossed, and got to figure it out.
Appreciate your time.
That was Wallace's perspective. Now I want you to listen to the perspective of Christopher Bell, who was also on the receiving end of a move by Wallace, similar to what Hamlin did to Wallace on that final lap.
Take me through that final run.
I mean, it went about how we thought it would. Just, people trying to fight for everything that they can get and every inch on the racetrack. And, yeah, I mean, it was just pretty much copy-paste what, 23 ran me up, and then Denny ran him up, and 9 cars drove by all of us.
How brutal is it knowing you had the opportunity to win and then have a Hendrick car steal one from the Toyotas?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's disappointing from a manufacturer standpoint. I don't know what more you can do. Just got to race each other with respect, and that's why we didn't win today.
Racing a teammate with respect. Where have we heard this before? Sounds pretty familiar, huh? All right, guys, that's a wrap on today's episode. Let's talk about it. Let's start with that ACC football game on Friday night and what I had to say about NASCAR adopting something similar. Would you like to see something like that? Moving on to the comments on Saturday from Hamlin about his involvement with Ty Gibbs the weekend before at New Hampshire. What did you think of Hamlin's remarks? And more specifically, what do you think of Gibbs's move intentionally avoiding the media? As for the race, what did you think about the overall racing product? I thought it was a really entertaining race, which we've come to expect at Kansas in the Gen 7 car. And what did you think of that delayed caution on that late spin by Hocevar? And finally, I want to hear what you guys thought about that finish. Was Hamlin in the wrong for what he did to Wallace, or was he just racing for the win? Was Wallace in the wrong for what he did to Bell? Let me hear what you think. Thanks again for checking out the latest episode and supporting the channel. I really appreciate it and hope you have a great rest of your day.